I solemnly swear that I am up to no good.
Messrs. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs are proud to present the Marauder's map.
If you succeed tonight, more than one innocent life may be spared.
Expecto Patronum!
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Today we're discussing Chapter 18, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. So we have Anna back with us again.
Hi.
She kind of likes this chapter.
It's no big deal.
Yeah. This is going to be a really brief rundown because this all happens in one room. So this whole chapter...
The room where it happens.
It's the room where it really is the room where it happens. Hamilton. So this entire chapter takes place in the Shrieking Shack between Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Sirius and Lupin having this big conversation where Lupin just info dumps a lot. And Sirius is very impatient. And the rest are just like, what the actual heck is going on right now?
The reason they try to instill on this conversation, that Hermione tries to instill on this conversation.
Wait.
It's wild.
What? If you know Hermione's trying to get clarification on things and she's trying to keep up, then you know it's like, oh, what are we talking about? Anyway, I just wanted to start this off really quickly with, we need to give Ron his props, because
So many props.
A, he has a horribly broken leg, and this entire time, since he left Hagrid's hut, he's been holding on to this squirming rat who's been biting and scratching him, and he's been holding on to it.
Well, first he held onto the biting, scratching rat. Then, while doing that, he held back Harry in the last chapter on his broken leg. Then he rolled on top of Sirius so that Sirius couldn't get the wand. Ron is just very active with this broken leg.
We need to
and the biting, scratching, bleeding hands.
We need to give Ron a toughness card. He gets a card for toughness here.
Absolutely.
Because, my goodness.
Gryffindor.
We see him in the chess scene. Mm-hmm. It's a tough, brave Gryffindor moment. And obviously he helps Harry in a lot of different ways in the Chamber of Secrets. But this, I feel like, is low-key the toughest he's ever been. It just goes completely unnoticed. Give Ron some props. If
a rat bit me or scratched me,
I'm tossing that thing
second,
just
boom, it's gone.
Chucking it.
I scream, dropped by Peter Pettigrew.
Yeah, I'm not having any of it. Sirius is obviously very single-minded here. Yeah. He is only there for one reason and one reason only, and it's not Harry.
No, it is not.
But this quote that I have here is just, it's dark, it's aggressive, it's threatening, it's all of the above. I want to commit the murder I was imprisoned for. That's a line.
That made me think of a question.
Yeah.
It's a very Muggle question. Do you think the Wizarding world has double jeopardy?
Oh.
I mean, Sirius didn't finish serving his time, so it's a moot point for him. But, say he didn't escape. He was released. And he went free, and he committed the murder he was imprisoned for. I wonder if
would
he
he
be imprisoned again.
get imprisoned twice for it, or would they just imprison him for the original sentence and be like, well, you did it,
right.
So we're going back to
I know, right? I just, slid it through my mind, and then I moved on.
The honest answer is probably they'll find a way
exactly.
to put you back in Azkaban.
That's what I was thinking, too.
That's
what I was thinking, too. Especially if Fudge is the minister.
Yeah. So, Sirius is basically, I hate to call him one note, but he's basically the one note throughout the entire chapter of just can we get this over with now? Can I
Hurry
kill
up,
him?
Remus.
Yeah, can we get this over with? I kind of want to kill him now.
Only one will die tonight.
You almost forget Sirius is even there until he chimes in with these threatening, one-liners. But anyway, yeah, I just get and you still have to picture that description that you read in the last chapter of this man sitting in a corner just wanting to kill something.
He's not sitting in the corner anymore. He's sharing the bed with Ron.
Oh, that's right.
I'd be freaking terrified.
Yeah, Ron's like, get away from me, Remus. Get away from me, Lupin. And he's got, this guy sitting next to him. Okay.
Priorities.
Yeah. Anyway, so Lupin essentially controls this entire chapter.
Yes.
And he just lays out a ton of information. A lot of which goes back to, the premise of it is, Harry, you have to understand. Like, you have to understand at least a little bit of this. You got to know what we know. You got to know who we are a little bit. Like, which
I think is a testament to Lupin. Like, he's taking in so much information for himself right now, too. He even says, like, Sirius, you're going to have to help me. I don't know all of it. But he's so determined to make sure that Harry understands.
To be fair, Harry is in a... I think, literally, Lupin, he gives him back the wands.
Yes.
He puts his own away, and it's like, you're armed, we're not, can you just listen to me for a second? Harry's not exactly in a talking mood in these two chapters. The last one and this one. He's more of in an action mode.
Again, Harry.
Yeah, it's very much Harry. And I'm sure Ron would be just as thrilled if he could actually stand on two legs. Hermione's a little bit more curious. It's like, no, wait, how does this play out? Like,
but that's
also Hermione. I know.
Like,
yeah. Yes. Roll delineation to its finest right here. But anyway, so we learn a lot about, well, really a lot of things about Lupin, and the whole werewolf background that Hermione kind of outed to the whole room last chapter, and he's like, okay, yes, I am a werewolf. Here's how that goes. I love how he also pointed this out to he's even in this moment when it's so tense and there are literal lives on the line, Lupin still pokes at people.
Oh, yeah.
Because he poked at Hermione in the last chapter.
He's a Marauder for a reason, dude.
He might... He's phenomenal in so many ways. But he poked at Hermione in the last one, being like, ha, you only got 1 out of 3 right. Here, he's like, Harry, I literally told you that the Whomping Willow was put here when I got here. What you think that was for? Me.
Oh, I've never read it that way before.
Yeah, it was like, I literally told you this.
Read it. Well, yeah, he says, like, oh, I told you this information.
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you a little bit more about that. Like, oh, it's actually my fault.
Yeah, I just, the only reason I thought of that was because of his Hermione comment in the last chapter of like, guys, I just told you this. He kind of details that. He details his friendship with, really the other 3 of them. All 3 of them. And he gets into how the Wolfsbane potion wasn't a thing yet when they were in school, and his struggle of, because he was bitten as a child.
Yeah, I think eventually, like, J.K. ended up telling us he was 4, I want to say, when he was bitten.
Okay.
So, like, I mean, that's...
Young kid.
Imagine being a little child, not understanding what happens to you.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
But it's horrifying on a lot of different levels.
And the pain that he describes, oh my gosh.
Yeah, he gives a very vivid description of being a werewolf and the horrors that are involved in it, both from the onlookers around and the actual individual themselves.
Right.
Really good job describing that whole totality of the scene. And then, so they say, like, Wolfsbane wasn't invented yet. That wasn't a thing. So the risk that Dumbledore takes on by even letting him into the school. He goes into a great deal describing the gratitude that he has and the risk that Dumbledore went out on a limb for him to even come there. And all of the things that went on for him to even stay there, like planting the Whomping Willow, which I'm sure was not a small undertaking for a couple of different reasons. It's a plant that likes to beat on things. Like, putting it in a school is
even
probably
just the mechanics of a different person sneaking him out of the castle each month, and like once a month they're at Hogwarts for a large chunk of the year.
Yeah.
To keep it unnoticed, that the only people who figured it out were James, Peter, and Sirius. Like, it's kind of shocking.
Yeah.
But
and that kind of goes to, how close they were, and not everybody was probably Lupin's, best friend forever. Look, as cool as Neville is, I'm sure nobody really is paying attention to his day-to-day schedule necessarily.
True.
So it's like, Or Seamus or Dean or whoever you want to throw out there. No one's really like, I
Seamus
wonder
and
what
Dean pay attention to each other's schedule. They have matching tattoos now.
them, but like the Gryffindor common room as a whole is not like, where's Dean every Thursday? Like, whatever. So, anyway. Wolfsbane's not a thing. So I got to figure out different ways of, as you just pointed out, shuffling him out of the castle
Right.
and having a safe, controlled spot for him to become the werewolf. And then Sirius and James figure it out. And then and we can kind of get more into this in the spoiler section. They spend a lot of time figuring out how to best work their friendship and keep their friendship together. And we'll have details on that, but we can get into it in the spoiler. They talk about like literal time frames.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating.
Oh my god, so fascinating.
Which I think you did.
I did.
You did a whole thing on Animagus.
I went down a bit of a rabbit hole.
So we'll get to that. Come back for the spoiler section for that. It's going to be great. But skipping past that for right now, he does mention like werewolves being an only danger to people, which is a whole side discussion that we could also get on. And I have questions about it. And again, that crops up into our Animagus discussion. But he gets to the point where they helped, even without the Wolfsbane potion, which we learn helps keep the individual's mind,
yeah.
which is fascinating. That's a really cool aspect of that magic. Like, okay, we can't figure out how to undo that werewolf curse, so how do we figure out a way to manage it?
Yeah.
It's a cool outside-the-box idea. He points to them as friends without the use of the potion, being able to kind of rein in his personality a little bit and still have a little bit of himself in there, which...
His mind became less wolfish, I think is the way he worded it.
Which is kind of a cool thing to delve into as well, of how exactly that works, and is there, like... And there's another thought I just come up with now as I'm speaking, but, like, is that an inherent form of magic that's not talked about?
Well, I thought it went back a lot to the discussion you had with Elizabeth over whether Animagus can communicate with other animals.
Yeah.
But then there's also the added layer of Lupin himself is a wizard, so he's not like an animal wolf. So like, is that an added layer to like? Is it a bunch of like wizarding people who are already close? Is their friendship that's already been established? Does that add another layer to the fact that he's able to keep his mind, or is it just that there's other animals that are kind towards him? I feel like there's just a lot of layers.
What I was thinking is, we know of spells, of cheering charms or Expelliarmus or what have you that are like specific, obvious, in-your-face magic spells. We also have heard of other spells that are a little less visible and more subtle, like older magic. The example I was thinking of is Lily's magic by saving Harry. It's not necessarily like in-your-face overt magic. It's like, but I don't want to call it like a trick or like a little like,
To me, it's like
it's subtle.
like a deep earthy magic. It's like ancient.
Yes.
So it's forgotten for the new flashy like spells.
Spell-based thing. It's so if a mother can have that type of magic towards a son, and it's just a deep bond. If you had a friendship that was so deep, could that supersede other forms of magic?
I would say yes.
That's where I was going with that, is the whole...
Because it is, the level of friendship I think the Marauders had for each other, that Harry, Ron, and Hermione have for each other, that is a level of friendship different, but I would argue, as a person who has very close friendships, equivalent to the love Lily laid down when she saved Harry. Different.
Well, I mean, there's different words for love. I mean, there's different, forms of love.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
There's different forms of love, and just because there's different forms doesn't make them equally strong. So, I would say, a different Animagus being in the Shrieking Shack with Remus as he's transforming would not have helped him keep, Severus Snape became an Animagus and was in the Shrieking Shack with Lupin. It's not going to help him keep his mind as much as maybe it would help him a little bit.
Could it also adversely affect it? Like someone that's not a friendly, at all? That being said, the danger is real. Like, whether you're friend or not, you're still getting into a room with a werewolf that has...
Except apparently the danger is not the same because a bite doesn't affect animals. It doesn't affect them the same as it would when they're not transformed, which I thought was fascinating.
That leads to a whole other line of questioning.
I know, we should just leave the Animagus stuff alone for the spoilers.
Yes. We'll deep dive hard into all the Animagus stuff in the spoilers. But Lupin goes on to explain how he feels really guilty for hanging out with Sirius and Peter and James because he was essentially betraying Dumbledore's trust in putting others in danger.
Right. Because
no matter how good of friends they were, or how good they were at whatever magic they wanted to do, there's an inherent risk. And it's it's a mess, and not even for them. Lupin goes into talking about how they didn't just stay in the shack. They roamed the forest,
Hogsmeade,
the grounds, and he reflects on it and being like, we were young and thoughtless, like more of an immature...
I feel like he said something about, too clever for their own good.
That was how he finished it,
yeah.
Yes. So they were very cocky, arrogant about their own talents.
Which I think is... I think most teenagers would be, yeah.
Young, leading to, a more immature attitude. And thoughtless in that, they just weren't thinking of, what could have actually really happened.
Really bad things.
Really bad things could have happened. We're dealing with a series of books right now where the main characters are young kids. They're 13.
Yep.
We're not giving anybody a pass for doing something recklessly dumb.
Of course not.
No matter what age you are, it's dangerous. But you do have to keep in mind that they're not adults. They don't see consequences the same way.
33-year-old people sitting here discussing 13-year-olds' actions are going to much more easily see the consequences of said actions than said 13-year-olds.
Right.
Yes.
So, there's a lot going on there. But this is exactly what Lupin's doing. As an older... God, he is our age. Isn't he about this time?
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
So it is Lupin reflecting on his younger self going that was dumb. We should not have done that.
Right.
It was a bad idea. Bad things could happen. We were outrageously lucky.
I would go even further to ask the question... I love Lupin. I very much am glad Lupin was able to go to Hogwarts, become friends with the Marauders, and live his life that he lived. I think it was very kind of Dumbledore. I see Dumbledore's viewpoint. Say you were a parent of Davy Gudgeon.
Davy Gudgeon reference, I love it.
Say you found out, that a werewolf was allowed... it is inherently dangerous. Dumbledore put in a great plan, but it still wasn't foolproof. And, was perfect example of what happens to Snape. A lot of bad things could have happened. I'm not trying to bring up, Ron's discrimination or anything like that, but, there is an inherent danger to a werewolf being around people.
No, Dumbledore took quite a bit of risk. Granted, you're also...
I'm glad he did it.
Sure.
I'm so glad Lupin lived the life he lived.
If you're Dumbledore, you almost, take into account, I've already established my name for all of eternity. I've done this, and this already. Forget, what I'm doing as the headmaster of Hogwarts. He's treating his reputation almost as, his own personal, Protego.
I like that.
Don't come at me. I've saved you all. I don't want to hear, shots at me. I can, and it's honestly, it's a little bit of his own personality shining through of his own bravado. He's confident in himself.
Yeah.
To fix whatever potential issues come.
Keeping everybody safe from that situation. Yeah.
Whether it's possible or not doesn't even occur to him because he's prodigiously talented and prodigiously wise. So he's whatever happens, I got this. I'm freaking Dumbledore. So, anyway,
Yeah.
Lupin goes on his wonderful monologue to explain that he believed that Sirius did what he did. Because to his knowledge, that lined up, that made sense given what he knew of the situation at the time, which goes back to the Sirius and the Peter switching places bit.
Yeah.
Which we didn't really talk about in the last chapter, but what he means is the Secret Keeper.
Yes.
They switched Secret Keeper, which Lupin was aware of, except he didn't know that they switched.
Right. He was aware of...
The original plan.
I think everybody in the Order of Phoenix was aware that James and Lily were going under the Fidelis
Correct.
charm.
Yes.
But, yeah, the switch...
That was a very inner circle thing.
Nope. Inner. Like,
Inner.
4 people.
Yes. Side note, how would you feel if you were Lupin? Like, figuring all this
Oh
out
my god,
right now?
I'd be so hurt.
Be crushing!
Crushing.
You're the one left out of that conversation, and you were a part of that entire
they
group.
thought he was the spy.
I know,
which just goes back to werewolf discrimination from his closest friends. I feel so sad for him. Lupin has been so alone for so long. It makes me so sad.
That would crush my soul if I put that together.
Make it very hard for me if I were Lupin to forgive Sirius. Like, I feel like Lupin and Sirius just, like, go right back to, you know, embracing as brothers. Like, as soon as Lupin figures out the switch. I don't know if I would have been as quick to forgive, not knowing about the switch.
I would have. That's a complete mind-blowing experience, though, because on one hand, you are elated.
Right.
Because
I have people
your
again.
best friend forever, is...
Love of his life. Will stay forever.
His best friend is not a murderer. That's great.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, you gotta have...
You still have a best friend who is a murderer, who pretended to be dead for 12 years.
Yeah, that's true, too. That is true. So, this is the depths and the levels, and we've talked about that this entire book for Lupin. Like, the depth and levels of the emotions that he must be feeling at any given point in this entire book.
Harry goes through a lot. I would argue Lupin goes through more.
Yeah. I would say that because Lupin's a full-grown adult who can fully grasp the complete depth of everything. Harry, bless him, a lot goes over his head. And only a couple of things actually Velcro stick. And it's usually the angry, aggressive ones that stick. So Lupin, given all of that, originally believed that it was Sirius using the dark arts to get into Hogwarts. He shoved, as best as he could, the idea that he was using his ability as an Animagus to get around security. As much as he probably knew that that was how he was doing it, he just tried to shove that to the mind because that was another secret he was keeping from Dumbledore, which he then felt guilty about. There's so much. I do have to bring it back to the light side. Animals get in and out of Hogwarts all the time. Like, now I get that if Sirius is talking, well, you're talking about Sirius and Peter in this specific case, and Crookshanks, right? Sirius is the big black dog is getting in and out of Hogwarts.
Crookshanks, he's brought in, but he definitely
He brought in, but he obviously gets in and out because he's roaming the grounds with Sirius at some point.
Right.
And then Peter, as Scabbers, gets in and out.
Yeah.
So,
somehow gets into Hagrid's milk jug.
That I have no idea.
Yeah.
But as far as getting in and out of Hogwarts, obviously Sirius and Peter...
Trevor escapes a lot, too.
That's fair. I don't know that he leaves the castle, but he does get out a lot. At least of the common room.
Right.
So, I'd imagine Peter and Sirius obviously know some of, if not all of they know all of the passageways. Mm-hmm. So they could squeeze in and out, however which way they need to. And I would guess then Sirius instructed Crookshanks on how to get in and out of the castle. So that's, I guess, would explain that. But I'm just like, while reading it, I'm like, wait, how did Crookshanks get out to the castle tonight to meet with Sirius, like, way back when? Did Sirius, when he broke in, just be like, hey,
I mean,
Crookshanks.
cats are pretty, like, resourceful.
You need to go to this thing of armor on whatever floor. You need to do. How does it even get in there? Because you need to do the spell. I don't know.
I don't think Crookshanks has to use. I think he just kind of, like, walks around.
Just like slinks
Yeah.
out of the door somehow.
Yeah.
Flitwick?
Filch is going out into the grounds to do whatever Filch does, and Crookshanks just slips up behind him.
Are you suggesting a Crookshanks Mrs. Norris
Yes.
relationship right now?
Absolutely. Oh my god, for sure.
Is that what you're insinuating
Yes,
right now?
I think actually Crookshanks and Mrs. Norris are in a relationship.
What's the relationship name now? You
Mrs.
got
Shanks.
Mrs. Shanks. We're going with it. We're going with Mr. Shanks. Let us know on Twitter and Instagram what your ship name for Crookshanks and Mrs.
Please
Norris
do.
is.
Give us your
That's a
best.
whole line of fan fiction I don't want to read.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Will Stuyvesant.
I was going to say, we've talked about a lot of shipping fan fiction. Wow, that took a turn. All right, how about we go into the spoiler section now? Unless there's anything else you wanted to get to on the non-spoiler bit.
I don't think so.
But we
Do you
have...
want to talk at all about how the chapter ended before we go into
Oh, that's right. We have this big cliffhanger. We have this big cliffhanger where the door opens and everybody's like looking around and nobody sees anything. And Lupin is particularly curious. And he goes all the way up and he looks really hard. Pauses his epic story.
He knows something is going on.
He knows.
He knows.
You know who should probably know something's going on? Harry. Like, door mysteriously opens. And I think Ron goes like, it's haunted. And Lupin's like, it's not haunted.
That's how he gets into the whole story.
This has always been me.
When did they bring up... Because we learn about the details of the... I don't know why they call it a prank, but they call it a prank that Sirius played on Snape when they were at school. That story gets told in this chapter.
It does get told in this chapter of... I think it goes more along the lines of them breaking Dumbledore's trust. And then, no, Hermione specifically goes...
Yes, she brings up the danger that could have happened, right?
Yes. Hermione points out, like, you guys were wandering the grounds as a werewolf? Like, that's a problem. Which is where, Lupin goes, yeah, we were young and thoughtless. But that's kind of how he gets into this.
Which, again, although Lupin feels, how mad... If I were Lupin, I don't know if I would have been able to forgive Sirius for that. Like, that prank... quote unquote, is the reason Sirius Black will never be my favorite Marauder. Like, that's a terrible... I mean, they were older when that had to have happened. That had to have happened 15, 16, 17 years of age.
I would put it around 50. I would put it around their 5th year, probably. Yeah.
I
don't know that for a fact,
I would
but-
have been really mad at Sirius if I were Lupin. Anyway, that was a tangent.
So Sirius, the whole thing was Snape was poking around and trying to figure out where they were going, and he was trying to figure out what Lupin was up to every month and things like that, and he was getting closer and closer to figuring it out. So Sirius was like, okay, and
He just told him to go how to get to the Shrieking Shack.
this is where Lupin's going. Go. I mean, he was very direct about it. James was not on board with that game plan. And
It's my boy.
went to stop Snape from going to
Which he had
the
to do
shack.
in human form, so he put himself at risk as well.
That is true.
Just throwing it out there.
And so when I read this and I'm reading Lupin's story, I'm like, Anna's going to jump all over this.
Where do you
For
think
James.
the love for James was born?
I know.
Come
I
on.
know. I literally, I was reading this with like my analytical, critiquing, objective, like I'm reading this book to do a podcast and write notes and do the whole thing. And my secondary monologue was, Anna's going to point this out. This is where Anna's love of James started. Like I had a secondary monologue running as I was reading this chapter.
You're welcome.
It's almost like we've talked Harry Potter before. Long before this podcast ever started. So anyway, yeah, that's where that came in. You see everybody's take on it. You see why Lupin is like, I wasn't a part of this. Like, why are you upset with me? You understand Snape being
Well, right. Yeah.
like truly, understandably upset. Of like, I could have, at best, been like just scared, whatever, and embarrassed because whatever happens. At worst, he could have died.
Whatever he thought he was going to find at the end of the tunnel, I'm pretty sure it wasn't a werewolf.
I guess Snape's a smart guy. He might have been piecing together a couple of bits of it.
I still don't think he expected to actually find the werewolf
Well, they're
there waiting to, like, bite him.
I will give you this. It's like, whatever you think is different from expectation. Like, he might have been thinking, like, he might be doing this every month, and then seeing it is like, oh my. Like, whoa. But, so anyway, the mysterious door opening, but no one there, at the perfect dramatic Snape. They're
literally talking about the prank, and Harry says, so that's why Snape doesn't like you, because he thought you were in on the joke. And that's when Snape reveals himself. That's right, sneered a cold voice from the wall behind Lupin.
That is the most 13-year-old drama queen Snape you are ever gonna get.
Snibbleless.
Like, that is him full on. Like, we've talked about him kind of like being childish sometimes, letting go of the past. This is him like fully reverting back to like 13, 14-year-old Snape.
He is right back in that moment.
Oh, man. Anyway, we should pause.
Yeah.
Take a break, and we will come back for a very Animagus heavy spoiler section. We'll be right back.
You foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach!
All right, we are back with the spoiler section of Chapter 18, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. So, thank you. It's a lot of words. It's a long chapter title.
Sure, hold down.
So, in Lupin's big monologue here, he does drop the detail of how the Marauders came to be their different Animagus. And he says, after 3 years it took them to learn and practice. They finally figured it out in their 5th year, which is a little interesting math because 5 minus 3, they started in their 2nd year.
12 years old.
That is mind-blowing.
Yep.
And not to put any shade on Hermione figuring out the Polyjuice Potion in her 2nd year, because she completes the Polyjuice Potion.
Yeah.
They don't complete
in
it
one
here.
try, right.
But they have the ambition and which is a Slytherin trait, oddly enough. But they have the ambition and the
fortitude.
Oh, that's a good word.
Like, it is.
That's a good word.
Process. Thank you. I like it.
Yes, they have the ambition and the fortitude to even attempt such. We learned in this book that McGonagall doesn't even bring up being an Animagus until year 3. They started this in 2.
So 1, they already know what an Animagus is, which, fair enough, all of them have grown up in a wizarding household. So there's that. But also, they had to have gotten into the restricted section to find out what this process is. And I feel like at least a year of this was researching how to do it.
At least. I mean, Lupin says that they were young and somewhat careless.
How did they even come up with the idea? Like, oh, you're a werewolf? Maybe if we become animals, that'll be helpful to you. We'll learn how to do this thing.
Lupin mentions that they were young and careless, but this requires some forethought.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, some real... Hermione we take as, like, a special mind and a special brain, which she is. She absolutely is. And Lupin, calls her the brightest witch of her age.
I have no doubt she could do this.
Yes.
If she set her mind to it.
But my point is, you have 4 individuals that accomplish the task.
3.
Yeah, but I would assume Lupin is helping them.
Lupin's helping them.
Yeah. Assume Lupin is like...
help them through the actual
right.
transformation.
But I imagine Lupin is heavily helping the research and the process and like, hey, how are we going to do this? How are you, because I guess he's often thought of, or at least I have often thought of him as like the Hermione of that group, like the brain part of it. Because he was the more...
I think...
They're all smart, don't get me wrong.
I was going to say, I think we do think of him that way. Like, I think the fandom as a whole.
Yeah.
is guilty of thinking him then. And as much as he is smart, he is a brilliant student.
Right.
I think James and Sirius are both more talented than him.
Lupin is, whatever you want to call it, the more academic of however you want to frame it is fine. My point is that, no, James and Sirius are particularly, you use talented, yes, obviously, but they're not dim either. They're very bright in their own right, especially when you give them a very focused goal to obtain, and they're locked in. They really can lock in and focus and achieve something. And we've talked on the podcast earlier, really briefly, we broke down Peter Pettigrew. And the fact that everybody shortchanges Peter Pettigrew all the time because he's always with James, Sirius, and Lupin. James, Sirius, and Lupin. James, Sirius, and Lupin. They're all this, and this, and this. Peter's not an idiot
Even in telling
either.
this story, Lupin says Peter needed all the help that James and Sirius could give.
Yeah, he needed a little extra help, and that's fine. But he
didn't end up half a rat.
That's true. I think Peter's smarter than a lot of people give him credit for. I think he's more talented than a lot of people give him credit for. He's not to the level of the other three.
Right.
Sure. Yes. That doesn't mean he's a complete...
Just to bring back the Dark Lord.
Right. But to the point about, him still being able to accomplish the task, Hermione gives us some fun facts about being an Animagus. And you have a ton on this, but there are only 7 registered in the last century.
Right.
Now, that goes to say 7 registered. That does not mean that there are others that aren't registered that have managed to accomplish the task. There's probably a fair few.
Which, when I read that in your outline, my first thought was, like, all capital letters, I thought there were a lot of unregistered Animagus. Maybe not as many as I was first thinking, because, like, really, when you think about it, yes, it's cool magic, but how many practical uses are there for it, depending on the animal you turn into?
And it's still, there's a lot of people in the world, so
yes.
More than 7 are more than capable of accomplishing
it. Then I read the process of becoming an Animagus, which is available for anybody who wants to read it on Wizarding World. It is a process.
Let's hear it.
So it is an 8-step process, which doesn't sound very long. But then, you read what it entails. And, it's so easy to mess up. And I feel like it sounds so intense. I feel like, to me, the way I read it, you're almost, changing your whole form. That, you're no longer 100% human. So basically, okay, so it starts out, quote-unquote, easy. First you have to be skilled in both transfiguration and potions, which I feel like maybe not everybody expects. You start out by carrying a single mandrake leaf in your mouth for a month, because it needs to soak up your saliva and your essence, apparently, which if you swallow it, you have to start over. So I feel like at some point one of the Marauders swallowed it, and that's why it took them. Then there's all these things about adding a dew that hasn't touched sunlight or a human foot, and it needs to do something for a certain amount of time, and then you have to wait for a specific type of storm. But then this is where I feel like it gets really intense. So when this specific storm starts, you have to hold your wand tip over your heart and recite an incantation over and over and over again at sundown and sunrise. And eventually you start to feel a second heartbeat inside of yourself. And that gets more intense. It's supposed to be very painful. You will feel, quote, a fiery pain. And then that second heartbeat you originally felt will get more intense. And then this is where it comes back to a conversation you and I have already had, is that when the fiery pain happens and the intense double heartbeat, that is when the shape of the creature that you're going to transform into will appear in your mind. And you don't have any choice in that creature. It's just once that second heartbeat starts up, your creature appears in your mind. And then as long as it has all gone correctly, that is when you will have your first transformation. And from there, it's a lot of, it seems visualization like how you turn back into your human. You no longer need a wand to be able to do this back and forth between animal form and human form. You just visualize it in your mind. To get back into human, you have to imagine your human form. To go into your animal form, you imagine your animal form.
So this is from the Wizarding World site, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do have one question about the choice of the Animagus, or the lack of choice of the Animagus. So wouldn't it be something if James and Sirius had this grand plan, and then they just so happened to be like
Small animals that couldn't control a werewolf.
or not even just small, but just like animals that can't control a werewolf of some sort.
Yeah.
Like that would be highly unfortunate.
It would indeed be. Yes.
So it's just like, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. From everything that I've read, you can't change it. Once you become an Animagus, there is no way to undo it. Like, you are permanently an Animagus for the rest of your life.
I have another quick thought
Okay.
that I just wanted to throw at you. We've talked about magic having the potential to be its own actual character through the series.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think instances like this are where, like, and I've likened it to the Force in Star Wars, where it's like the will of the Force? It's like, do you think this could also be like a will of magic? Like,
I do, because everything I was reading is like, so this form that appears in your mind that you don't have a choice in still reflects your personality, even to the point it said it was supposed to vaguely match your physical description. So like the one I thought of was Sirius. Like, I even like when he was young, he's described as having longer, shaggier hair, and then he's this shaggy big dog. So like somehow even physical descriptors are supposed to match up. But then, you know, a big deal is always made of Harry's Patronus being a stag, just like his father. Well, apparently for an Animagus, there is a link, according to Wizard World, a known link between your Animagus form and your Patronus form. So somehow I feel like it's all involved in your personal inherent magic and like your love. Like maybe, you know, a big deal is always made of Snape's Patronus being the same as Lily's and blah, blah, blah.
mm-hmm.
So like all of this magic is somehow inherent to like inside of you. So like, and that's like you said with the Force, is all inherent inside of the person.
I
It's
just,
like,
the more you deep dive into it, you just get the sense like magic's not random.
right.
Like it
And I think
has
that
a
goes
whole
back to the Marauders helping Remus keep his mind as a werewolf.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's an interesting kind of discussion to take when you recontextualize it that way. You know what I mean? And I guess you kind of answered it with the Patronus thing, but I was about to ask you, like, okay, Sirius and the you know, shaggy appearance and the dog, okay, I can get that. Where does James become a large stag?
I know. It's never made 100%. I actually did a lot of research into it, maybe when we were talking about Patronuses, about the meaning behind a stag.
You think the first time they did this for the first time and they showed each other like what forms? Sirius is just like, wow, a little horny there, bud, huh?
Oh, you know,
Like-
you know it happened that way. You absolutely know. And like, you know, they also made fun of Peter for being a rat. But
I'm
like,
sure.
nobody picked up on that. All this information that I just got from, you know, well, like one Google search that happened to bring me up to the exact Wizarding World article that I was looking for. All of the research that they did for all of these years, they didn't get a clue about what Peter being a rat would potentially mean for their friendship. But
Yeah, I don't know. I guess part of that is, you're right. If they had done the same potential research that you did on the Wizarding World, they should have come to that conclusion of like, well, what does that mean exactly?
being a stag means a loyal leader.
I still like my take on it, but that's fine.
Whatever.
I mean, there's functional uses for one of them being small, like obviously getting the knot on the Whomping Willow. So they might have figured, I believe that they're, and this very well could have been naive, but them thinking like, okay, well, you know, we're all really good friends, and there's functional, real world applications for that being small and useful. They could have just glossed over the potential, like, flags.
I know.
You know, and, you know.
Because at the end of the day, they think they know this person better than they did.
Go listen to our Peter Pettigrew breakdown, because it's actually quite good. And we get into the bits of Peter Pettigrew, like, he couldn't have been happy, like, with James and Lily, for that matter, being killed. He couldn't have been happy about that. Like, a lot of this was, and you just mentioned it, with all four of them keeping it from Lupin. Why? Because they thought he was a traitor. Why? Because Voldemort had created this level of suspicion and fear and this fog of war that was very real. And it permeated everybody. So this idea that Peter was purely, I'm gonna screw over James and Lily because I hate them. There might have been a level to that. Right. Jealousness,
I think there
whatever.
was an inherent bitterness in Peter that
Sure.
grew and grew.
There's a level between bitterness and I am going to cause their death.
Yeah.
And I think Peter gets the brunt of that. I don't think Voldy gets nearly enough, like...
Credit for turning him. He turned on the Tom Riddle charm that he uses with Hepzibah Smith and Slughorn.
It's a bit of that charm, and it's a bit of the, I have killed a whole bunch of people.
Right.
I won't stop because of you, and I won't stop because of them.
I'm gonna get them eventually. You're probably gonna die when I get them. Why not save yourself?
Like, people don't give enough validation to what that first Wizarding War was like. McGonagall in this book gets teary-eyed thinking of, like, it was awful. Like, that time was horrific, and that's McGonagall. So,
well, and think about when Moody goes through the picture of the original Order of the Phoenix.
They died, like, 2 days after this, or whatever.
Like, 4 people left from the original Order. Slightly more than that, but, like, most of the people in that picture were dead.
Like, and I'm going to toot our own horn here a little bit, but I'm proud of that discussion that we had, because it's a discussion that, me personally, I haven't heard anywhere else. So it's a conversation that's good to have. Yeah. And it's a little fuller picture of what Peter Pettigrew might have been going through, because I guarantee you it wasn't all rainbows and sunshine. Like, that's
Nobody's
hard.
life is all rainbows and sunshine.
None of that was good for anybody.
Right.
So, I'm sorry. I went on a tangent.
I love it.
You got a ton more on becoming an anime.
Well, I mean, like, I think it's just more, like... I don't know. It was really hard to organize my thoughts because I just feel like there's some, connection between human and animal. And I kept going a lot. I mentioned it in the non-spoiler section, back to the conversation you had with Elizabeth about, like, whether or not Animagus are able to communicate with animals, because... And then that brought me to the link between the interactions that a werewolf has with the human form versus the Animagus form. Like, what is it about an Animagus? They're not fully human when they're in that form, obviously, but they're also, like, they have to have some part of their humanness because they clearly still have their mind. And they need to be able to visualize themselves to get back into their human form. But there is inherently a fully animal level to them because the werewolf can't harm them. Like, they can't turn them into a werewolf. Mm-hmm. But clearly, I think there has to be some sort of level of communication. And inherently, is that why Lupin more fully keeps his mind? Because he's basically having a conversation with his friends now and having fun with his friends just in this animal form. It's just like, I feel like there's whatever the magic there is in this transformation into, which everything Wizarding World says is it should not be considered the same as Transfiguration. That Transfiguration and Animagi are different. That basically Animagi is a learned skill, is the way they put it. And they say that it's because it doesn't require a wand and that it's permanent. Whereas Transfiguration requires a wand, an incantation, and can be reversed. So I just feel like the more I read about it, the more I felt like if you decide to become an Animagus, you are somehow inherently changing your form.
Like,
So
like down to like a molecular level. Like you're literally changing your essence, for lack of a better
like you're
word.
still human. Obviously, there's still human in you, but some part of you is also now like animal. Like it was just like, I don't know. It's wild.
And I wonder. So if your personality and who you are, physically, emotionally, mentally, personality, whatever, if who you are affects what you become as an Animagus, I wonder how much of that is like reversed the other way. Like the more you become this Animagus,
Oh, like if you like
do
how
those traits then flip
did
over and become?
Peter's personality change in some way by living as a rat for 12 years? Yeah,
Finding ways to survive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
for sure. Yeah, that's a good reverse.
I was just wondering, like, if one interacts on the other, why can't the other interact on it?
Yeah,
You know,
I think
the
it's
original.
got to.
So, well, especially and changing for. I mean, they changed it every month for years.
Mm-hmm.
Years.
Even
Even though they didn't.
and
you
I
know,
feel like they had to have probably started using it a lot more during the war. Like
it's
how
useful. It's a
many-
useful trait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, I'm about to be caught. Well,
Which
I'll
they
just
still
turn
kept.
into a dog and just trot out of this alley.
So you're in the Wizarding War, and you're in the Order of the Phoenix. You're still keeping that little tidbit about yourselves
Ooh, yeah.
private.
So
Dumbledore
true,
didn't
yeah.
know how to use
Yeah.
that to, I guess, full effect, because he didn't know, apparently. So, which, by the way, is an
How
impressive
did they keep that a
magic
secret
trick
from
in itself.
Dumbledore?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Also, just when you said this also made me think
Mhm.
Lupin was still changing into a werewolf once a month. He still didn't have the Wolfsbane potion during the first Wizarding World.
Yeah.
I would bet so much money James and Sirius and Peter, I will give it to Peter, I will bet you they still found a way to be there for his transformations. Maybe not all three of them at the same time like it used to be at Hogwarts.
I'm
But
sure
I will
there's
bet you he still was never alone in a transformation.
practical applications for it, because we know what his role was in the second Wizarding War, of being like underground spy almost.
Oh, he had the same role in the first war.
Right.
Because I think they said that's the main reason they didn't trust him, that's why they thought he was a spy. Because most of the time he was away in the underworld.
Okay, so I'm sure there's practical applications during a war to kind of keep him more in check. But also, there had to be times then when the full purpose was to literally let him go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's tricky. It's a whole lot of... But I mean, this is deep and not really related. But I mean, it's war. You got to take chances, and you got to take,
Yeah.
whatever shots you have, you got to fire them. So, especially in that
Especially
particular...
when you're a losing person, like, every day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's... People don't talk about the First Wizarding War, I don't think, as much. Granted, we don't
talk
have,
about
like...
the First World War very much either, do we?
That's
It's all
true,
about
too.
World War II.
Yeah, that's true, too. Funny how those parallel. It's almost like it was done on purpose. but
No.
no. You have anything else on Animagus?
No, I think I went down my full rabbit
It
hole.
was awesome. I've always been a fan of guests coming on and giving me a full down the rabbit hole, deep dive on whatever research they've
I
done.
hope I communicated it well. That
You did.
people
I-
find
you
it
did a
as
great job.
fascinating as I did. So
I think it's really cool, and I appreciate the Animagus research on Wizarding World and all of that. I think people will find that really really illuminating.
It was wild. Maybe I'll post the link on the Instagram for us.
There's an idea. And we'll do it on the Twitter as well. So we'll post all of that. Let us know what all of your thoughts are on the Marauders as a whole, on Peter Pettigrew, on becoming an Animagus. What Animagus would you become?
Such a question.
We'll ponder this one.
Yeah.
And get back to it in the final episode. We're running long, but
Sorry, guys.
I did want to ask you one question since it's a big Marauder. It's literally Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. This is the chapter title here.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit about when the Marauders map was personally insulting Severus Snape.
Mm-hmm.
And it literally went line for line, 2, 3, 4 insults. The question we posed was, is that literally each one of the Marauders, all 4 of them, writing their own particular brand of humor insults into the map? Like, is that their individual personality? Because all 4 of them contributed.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So is that each one of their personalities coming through in their sense of humor? Or is it just like the person that just, is like, which insult can I write? Whatever. Is it just like one of them? Or is it like literally each one of them writing an insult and being like...
I think it's each of their personality. Each insult is individual enough. To me, it gives off, you can tell it's coming from a different person. To me. Anyway, I don't know.
I would like to believe that it's the 4 of them, because that just makes it fun. And also, like we've talked about already, it puts them on more equal footing of, like,
Yes.
they can each banter with each other and each
Right.
toss and throw different, like...
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. So, Mr. Moony presents his compliments to Professor Snape and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business.
Does that sound
It's-
like Lupin?
It's detailed. It's
He uses a big word,
subtle,
abnormally.
It's a big word. He's not crass. It's kind of like sassy to me. It's not. So yeah, like let's compare it to Mr. Prongs agrees with Mr. Moony and would like to add that Professor Snape is an ugly git. It's not, doesn't take a lot of thought. It's just like throwing out there, I'm going to call you a name. There's not a lot of cleverness to it. Not that James isn't clever, but like when he's insulting Snape, it's just kind of like, I'm just going to say the most, first thing that comes out of the gate.
I could buy James. Yeah, I could buy that for James.
It's very Harry, Yeah, Harry has some sassy comebacks. Harry is the king of
Comebacks.
sass.
Yeah, he's
But when he's just like insulting someone, I feel like he's just going to like throw it out there. And that is very James, too, to me, anyway.
Mr. Padfoot would like to register his astonishment that an idiot like that ever became a professor. That's a little bit more clever. That's a clever little shot.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I like the magic in it that they've registered that Snape is now a professor at.
Right. So, like, and I feel like that right there in and of itself says something about, like, they had to have imbued some part of themselves because the map is still learning things. The map is taking information in.
Honestly, reading the last one real quick,
Mm-hmm.
I think it might actually be the wittiest.
Yeah, no, I know. I just read it and I was like, wow, that's a lot better than I remember it being.
Mr. Wormtail bids Professor Snape good day and advises him to wash his hair, the slime ball.
Yeah.
That's
like,
witty.
That's actually the best of them all.
Like, and maybe it's, how you have to almost, like, when you're hanging out with a Quidditch star, and you're hanging out with the smart kid, and you're hanging out with, like, Sirius, who's just the cool guy impersonated. You have to, like, almost, you feel like you have to, like, overcompensate a bit. And he just, like, comes up with, like,
But also,
the best
I think that
shot.
might have just been inherently something about Peter Pettigrew, something about who he was. He made friends with these 3 intelligent, witty, people. They wouldn't have just been friends with some, giant idiot who couldn't form thoughts. They would not have been friends with Crabbe and Goyle.
Right, yeah. No, they would have been making fun of
Right.
Crabbe and Goyle in these things.
No matter what, status Crabbe and Goyle might have had, they would not have been friends with them. So, there must have always been an inherent wittiness to Peter Pettigrew.
What do you think with the moment that he changed was. The fear and anxiety. You know what I mean?
So I think
This is a side comment that's like...
I know.
Gonna open up a whole bag of...
I've always imagined the last few years of the Marauders Hogwarts time being more similar to what the 7th year of the books of, what Harry's 7th year would have been in Hogwarts. There was a lot more darkness. There was a lot more, there wasn't like students being tortured. But, they already knew that Snape was really into the dark arts. There was already like an underground world of like, hey, there's this group, we're going to join. Mm-hmm. This cousin of mine is already part of it as soon as we graduate. Like, I think there was already this like kind of underground dark world in the last few years of the Marauders' time at Hogwarts. And I feel like maybe Pettigrew, for whatever reason, Pettigrew had his nose too. I think Peter Pettigrew was always the type of person, he made friends with James and Sirius because he could see they were, the group, like you were saying earlier. They were the it group. But he wasn't going to put all his eggs in one basket. Well, so he always kind of had his ear to the ground with the dark side.
To your point, and you're to bring this around to your wonderful research on Animagus, and it's part of who you are, people automatically assume, like, rat equals betrayer, or rat equals liar. Rat is also a survivor.
Nope.
Rats survive in horrific, awful conditions.
Any natural disaster you are in, follow the frickin' rats, man.
Yeah, they're survivors.
Yeah.
So that's a different spin to put on Pettigrew. I wouldn't call it that a positive spin. I'm not like saying
not the person I would want to be, but
you follow where you're, best able to make it to the next day.
Yeah.
And if you have Voldemort knocking on your door, the next day becomes a lot better when you're like, I'll do what you need me to do.
Right.
When you're faced with death.
So I think that started at Hogwarts for him, though. Like, I don't think he started plotting,
sure,
if
yeah.
I have to, I'm going to. But I think he always kind of knew, like, there's this group. This is the person I should talk to if I ever need to, cover myself with this group. It's
clever. It's a clever thing, just in a different way.
Yeah.
It's,
like you said, it's a survivalist.
But it's that Slimeball quote that's like happy, joyful, quick-witted.
Right.
And it's just not the Pettigrew that we ever really see.
No.
Which also makes you wonder with, like, Sirius and Lupin.
There was a lot of the two of them, what they were like at school that we didn't get to see. I think that a war changes you.
Yes. Wouldn't it be, I know we've talked about it and I don't think it's ever going to happen, but if, God willing, someday we get a Marauders prequel.
Oh, it's all I want. I would be so happy.
I would love if they showed Pettigrew in this light. Mm-hmm. A happier, joyful, fitting in with James, fitting in with Lily and Sirius and Lupin. Not I don't want them to hit it on the head too hard of like, this is what he becomes or whatever. I want to see that. I want to see the slime ball throwing,
God, yeah.
Pettigrew.
Yep.
I think it'd be really cool. And then just make the actual series that much harder to take. You know what I'm saying?
I would love a series. I've always said I want it to start at the end of Snape's Worst Memory. And I want it to go up until Halloween 1981.
Yeah. If we got the prequel of Peter Pettigrew where he's best friends forever with the other three, and then we see the darkness that follows, that hits so much harder than it does with just like, he's a rat. It was obviously coming.
Yeah.
It's a good conversation. Anyway, I think we covered pretty much everything. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Not anything I have.
Okay. That was a great conversation. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it that was listening. We really appreciate you sticking with us through a long episode. I wish I could tell you that I didn't foresee these chapters being long, but I knew Anna loved them so much.
Yeah,
so
sorry, guys.
That's okay. Stick with us. We got this. This book gets crazy. So stick with us for the next couple of chapters, and the end of Prisoner of Azkaban is coming soon.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sad.
I know. So we got a lot of good conversations left to have. So join us. Talk with us on Twitter and Instagram. Let us know what you're thinking. And for Anna.
Bye. It was fun. Thanks.
I'm Dan. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.